It's a nice sunny day today somewhere. Great week we had. I'm going to take this name tag off. It is just enough in my periphery that is driving me insane. My name is Ashley Payne. It has been driving me nuts all the way during the singing. I've thought I've had something on my jacket now for the last 45 minutes. So I'm not going to stick it there because then it will never come up. Exodus chapter 21. Exodus chapter 21. We have left the Ten Commandments, and we're going to look at some of the sundry laws that Moses gives. And one of the problems with the sundry laws is, first of all, they come at you in a very disjointed way. It's almost like when Moses is writing, either God or Moses didn't take his meds that morning, because it's just like, and then this, and then, oh, cool, red cart, and then, oh, it's like carrying on a conversation with a kid hopped up on sugar with the attention deficit problem of a squirrel. Part of it, too, is when we look at these, and the reason why we're going to look at some of these is if you've encountered your culture recently on Facebook or even in person, they love to go to the sundry laws of the book of Exodus and the book of Leviticus to use as evidence as how corrupt your manuscript is, because there are some odd laws there. And what happens is they betray a couple of things. First of all, they don't understand the difference of culture between the 21st century and about the 4th or 5th millennia BC, depending on where you want to put this, or wherever it wants to fit. They don't really grab the cultural significance. A lot of times what happens is, and we're totally unaware of it, is that we take what we understand about the world and read back on the text and then try to make the text answer our culture, when in reality the text isn't written to your culture, it's written to their culture. And so we struggle with things like slavery. Because why? We shot each other over the issue of slavery. In this culture, slavery is perfectly acceptable understanding of means of commerce. We have an issue with how one procures a wife. Why? Because in our culture, which is relatively recent invention in our day and age, we date for our mates. You know, doesn't everybody? No. If you're from the Asiatic part of the world, probably don't date very much for your mate unless you're in more of an industrialized nation. Matter of fact, Europe, up until just recently, there wasn't a lot of dating for your mate. And you go, no, yes! Why? This is the great thing about history. It's more important than just helping you win at Trivial Pursuit and Jeopardy. Probably play them both, although I'd end up having a memory dump when I get on Jeopardy. And so what happens is we take our culture, read back on their culture, and go, this is crazy stuff. If you're in their day and age, what we're about ready to cover is so radically different than what's the accepted norm. You're going to talk about slavery, selling your daughter, and then killing. Those are the three areas we're going to look at. So now you know. Slavery, selling your kids, and then killing. And I got something for you young people, too. You need to pay attention, because there's a law in here that says mom and dad can take you out. It's said twice. So y'all better pay attention so you know when to duck. Now, these are rules that you shall set before them when you buy a Hebrew slave. Now, notice right now, here is some context that is being given to you that's free, that a lot of times people look past. When you, the audience being whom? Hebrews, buy a Hebrew. Not an Egyptian, not an Assyrian. When you buy a Hebrew. So this law is written to the Jews for a particular reason. Now, can we adapt this law for us? Absolutely we can. If we wanted to own slaves, we certainly can. I would prefer not. We shot each other for that, remember? When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. On the 7th year, he shall go free for nothing. If he comes in single, he goes out single. If he comes in married, he and his wife shall go out together. If his master gives him a wife, she bears him sons or daughters. The wife and the children shall be with the masters, and he shall go out alone. Oh, there's the problem. We were all good right up until that last caveat. When a man sells himself, well, here's the thing. There were not banks to go and borrow money to pay off your debt. One of the ways you paid off your debt in the ancient Near Eastern world is if you didn't have a land, if you didn't have means, you would sell members of your family, and then the last person to be sold into debt or into slavery would be the father. It's great to be the king. I'm kidding. But if you're single and you have debts, you could sell yourself into indebtedness. Now, here's the thing that's radically different than other cultures. Once you sell yourself as a slave, you're there until the debt's paid. In Jewish circles, because of this law, you're there for 6 years and must be freed on the seventh one, regardless of how much more you owe on the debt. So let's say you owe enough debt to pay off that has to take 14 years to pay off. The guy buys you, guess what? 7 years, you go free. This is tied when we go over to, and we're not going to go to Leviticus chapter 25, but it's contained here in Leviticus chapter 25. It's the sundry laws about the year of Jubilee, and it talks about rotating your crops. 6 years you tend them, 1 year they lay fallow. And it has all these things that are prescribed that Moses is hinting at here with these passages. But you do not own a fellow brother longer than 6 years. This is going to be set up when they go and start dividing up the land. You couldn't own the land of another person. It could be redeemed. And so he's laying the groundwork for what is eventually going to have more bones and structure to it. But right now, he's just assembling the outer frame. And a lot of times people grab this and go, well, these sound weird. If he goes in single, he gets to leave single. He goes in married, he gets to come out. But if the master gives him a wife and he has wives and kids, he's now faced with the conundrum of leaving his wife and kids, which may not be a bad thing. I mean, right? I mean, so they're snoring. No, I'm kidding. But there's a provision for this. If you continue to reading, the provision is if he says, I love my master, which is the first requirement, I love my wife, and I love my children, what I will do is make myself a servant in that man's house. And to sign for that is that they will take an awl, put his ear next to the post, and shove the awl through there. But there's a caveat before you get there. They're to go before the Lord. And they are to go before the Lord so that the man takes an oath that he is doing this of his own volition. He's not being coerced. It's not like, you'll bind yourself to me forever. And your kids, your wife, I'll let them go. But if you don't, bad things happen. It could be on a cart ride and the horse go out of control off a cliff they go. It'd be horrible, horrible, horrible accident. That's the reason why that part of the law is there. It's to keep that situation. And so what it does is you begin, if you look and if you're to read all these sundry laws, and I mean all of them, and we're not, you see that it begins to elevate the status of everyone in Israel, from slave to women to children. One of the interesting things about Christianity is that it elevates upward all of society. If you look at other religions of the world, there's one person or one gender that kind of gets all the cool stuff, and the other one kind of has to do all the hard work. And so it begins to elevate upward. So we've covered that one. Let's take a look at this other oddity that we have here. And I didn't bring my own water up here, did I? If a father, we'll walk over this way. Is my water here? There it is. Sorry. If a father sells his daughter, and the phrase there is slave. Do you see it? Yes? Okay. Great. Here's another problem when you start to do translations. What does it mean for a father to sell his daughter? Well, I won't get to the translation yet. Let's look at the whole passage. Sells his daughter, right? She shall not go out as the male slaves do. So it sounds like slavery. But if she does not please her master, who has designated her for himself, he shall let her be redeemed. Some odd language. He has no right to sell her to foreign people, since he has broken faith with her. If he designates her to his son, see, does this language strike you as odd? It does me. If he takes another wife for himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, and her marital rights. If you need to know what that is, ask your parents. And if he does not do any of these three, she shall go out for nothing without payment or money. If a man sells his daughter, sounds like a man is selling his daughter into sexual slavery to another individual. And if she doesn't please the master of the house, he can then give her to his son. And on the surface, that's exactly what it sounds like. The problem is, that's not it at all. The word slave that's used there is of the root that means maid, maidservant, or in this case, concubine. And this is a law that is prescriptively designed for concubinage. If that's a word, I'm going to use it 3 more times, and then it will be. And so when a man, due to indebtedness or due to the interest of a more wealthy individual, sees this girl and says, hey, what do I need to do to acquire your daughter to be my concubine/wife? Because here's the thing, this is how that happened a lot in those days. Well, I don't like that. Great, you thank goodness you live in the 21st century. These are rules regarding to the concubines. Now here's the thing. She's bought as a slave. In other cultures, if she displeased the master, guess what happens to her? Yeah. She disappeared. Oh, she went. She went for a ride in the country on a cart. And it was tragedy. It was horrible. She died. Notice in this case, if she displeases the master, he's bound and obligated for her maintenance. If he displeases her, he has to allow her to be redeemed by a family member. And we haven't covered the laws of redemption yet, and yet it's already having the structure put into place. If it can't be redeemed, he can designate her to his son, which means he doesn't sell her, but he now gives his son a concubine. Here's of age, folks. Don't go, he's giving a 10-year-old. No. But one of the requirements is he could not what? Could not sell her to a foreign. Did you catch this? To a foreign nation. This is radically new in this era because here's the thing. If I own you, I can sell you. I own some guns. Some of them displease me. I then sell those guns to someone else so they can displease them. Why? Because I own it. Well, I think a human being's worth more than a firearm. Yes, I know you do, and so do I. But in this area, once you were property, you were property. But notice what the law is doing here with this. She simply could not be killed, murdered, or sold off. There had to be some prescribed means for her maintenance. And then it continues on with some more language here that seems very interesting. Why can't he sell her? Because he's broken faith with her. He's entered into an agreement to buy her for her to be his concubine, and he has certain rights and obligations for that. And by the fact that he is displeased with her and wishes to be rid of her, he's broken faith with her. Which is why he can give her to the son. But notice this. He is to treat her as she was and she is now this is radical. We look at this and go, that's not very radical. In this day and age of when this is written, this would be radical. If he takes another wife for himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. if the boy takes another wife, he cannot, because he now has another woman. And you see this between Elkanah and Hannah and Peninnah. Hopefully I got that name right. In the book of 1 Samuel. He cannot simply go, well, I have a wife. So, since, you were once property and now are given to me. No. She gets all the same entitlement. Food, clothing, and marital rights. If you're confused, ask your parents. Notice how it elevates and gives to slaves or to servants more status than what their culture would actually have. Notice also that it's not written to you and I. The phraseology begins off with the segment of when you buy a. There you go. So let's move on down. Now we're going to get to killing. Killing's good stuff. I like killing. There's a lot of cool stuff in this killing. It's almost a little bit ADD as well. We get here. And by the way, am I the only one that feels like a burger under a heat lamp? Apparently I am. So we will just truck on. When a man strikes a man so that he dies, he shall be put to death. Now, here's the great thing about this section. There is a problem and a very instant solution. And it's very basic. If a man strikes a man so that he dies, he should be put to death. Notice the caveat. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hands, then it will be appointed for you a place that you may flee. So it begins with generalized killing, but also, hey, look, if he lied in wait, if he did so with malice, treachery, if he did so planning an ambush, this would be the category of what we would determine as premeditated murder. You've thought about doing this. You've put yourself in a place. You've intentionally cut the brakes on the cart so that the cart can't stop itself when the horse careens out of control with people on it and they die to their death like they do in mob movies. This is premeditated. And the results of premeditated murder is very simple. It is not forever in prison. It's death. People, I have a hard time believing that a loving God would ask for the demand that people be killed for killing people. What a mean and horrible God. Well, when you rip it from context, yeah, okay. But let us go back. Remember, why is it we don't kill? Is it because we don't kill because there are prescribed laws that say don't kill? I heard it. Because man is the image bearer of God. Yes, there are prescribed laws. And yes, we are to follow the prescribed laws. And yes, thou shalt not murder is as clear as you can get. But the reason why you don't kill is not because it disrupts good social order. It's because you have dared to reach out with your hand and strike or lay hold of the very image of the deity that made you. And the arrogance of that act deserves death. You have boldly decided, because this part here is premeditated, so you've had time to meditate on the act of killing and not on the fact that the individual bears the actual image. And you've dared to reach out and grab hold of the image of God and kill it. That's why we don't murder. And that's why when you do, death is required. The boldness of an individual to think that he can lay hold of that which represents the very image of God itself requires the response. But notice what happens. But if God lets him fall into his hand, then I will appoint a place for you. And then we'll get on further on as you look over in Leviticus and other places where cities of refuge come into place. So this is the precursor to that. So if God allows the man, or if your two men are struggling and it gets into this conversation, or this is more of a heat of passion type crime. You're wrestling, you're fighting, or the individual itself just happens to be in the way when you're taking care of business and you've killed this man. And it appears to be of nefarious reasoning, but it could also be accidental homicide. You can go to a city of refuge. You can plead your case. If the judge in the city declares that you're innocent, you get to go. If you're guilty of negligent homicide, though, you must stay within the walls or within the territory of the city of refuge, because if you don't, the other person's kinman can kill you. Again, these are passages that are primarily written to Jews about how they govern themselves. This sets them uniquely separate. Other nations do not have cities of refuge. If I kick you, I kill you. But if a man willfully attacks another man and kills him with cunning, you shall take him from my altar, and he shall die. If a man willfully attacks another, you will remove him from my sight. He will be separated from my covenant, which is the implication of being removed from the altar, and you kill him. Notice it doesn't say to maintain good social structure. Notice it doesn't say because, well, it's a deterrent for crime. Yeah, and while I agree that the death sentence is an excellent deterrent for the individual that is being killed, we don't execute people because it's a crime deterrent. We don't execute people because it's good moral social status. We execute people for murder because they have reached out and struck the image. A violation that begins during the text in early part of Genesis all the way to here. God is, if there's one thing that he's not joking about, this is one. And it pops itself up. But he's not done. This is one for you guys right here. This is the justification mom and dad have to take you out and make another one look just like you. Whoever strikes his father or mother shall be put to death. Then we'll look at the other one, jump down, verse 17. Whoever curses his father and mother shall be put to death. Whoop. I remember when I got to be taller than my mom. Being taller, and I wrestled, I felt that I was fairly invincible. You kind of feel that way when you're younger. Then you start hurting, and then you realize you're not. And one day she was saying something to me. She's going on, and I had had enough. Being young and taller and bigger, I went, all right. You know, that's the last time I've ever done that. I have said that sometimes it takes me more than one to learn. No, I learned that one just once. Y'all see my mom. She seems kind of sweet. She reminds me a lot of Stephanie, who seems so sweet. Help me. I'm afraid to go home. My mom looked at me and said, you may be bigger and taller and stronger than me. Well, you will eventually have to go to sleep. And I'll wear you out. For some of you, that may be just talk from your parents. For my mom, she meant it. If you curse your parents or strike your parents, you die. Why? Well, when you remember, if we looked at the passage, honor your mother and father, or obey your mother and father, not only do they bear the image of God, but they are the primary teachers for you in the home. In this society, mom and dad were the instructors to the kids, by which they relayed the mysteries of God to the children. And so not only are you striking the image bearer, you are now striking the primary instructor in the home to you. I know. Your parents are dumber than a box of hammers. Mine were too. I was amazed at how smart they got one day. One day I woke up, walked in, and my parents were geniuses. They must have done a lot of reading because, man. But here's the thing. This is what helps them out. That helps educate them. Or the eye roll. That lets them know that you're not happy with them. Right? And if you're really good, you can work them both. It's amazing how much smarter we are when we're younger. And then we grow up. To curse your parent, to lay hold of your parent, is to have a low regard for the position in which God has innately enabled them within the home. It is now not just contempt for the parent, but contempt for an almighty God who put them there. And the ultimate insult is then to put your hands on them to harm them. This is why you die. And then they make one to look just like you. Let's carry on. When men are quarreling and one man strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, the man does not die but takes to his bed. Then the man shall rise again and walk outdoors on his staff. He who struck the man shall be cleared, only shall pay the loss of time. And this is pretty basic, right? Two men are fighting and get upset. One man grabs a rock. Not that I do these things or have seen these things, but he goes, the guy doesn't die. Now, this is important because here in a little bit, a guy's going to cold cock a slave, and there's some weird rules with that. Guy doesn't die, so what do? You pay until you're the Aflac for that guy. Clear enough? Now, all these things are coming together, and they seem kind of squirrelish, and they all revolve around the central aspect of the uniqueness of the human form in that it bears the image. This is why you treat slaves differently than the rest of the world. Why? Because it bears the image. But notice what you get going on here. What about a slave? Well, when a man strikes a slave, male or female, with a rod, and the slave dies under his hands, he shall be avenged. Kill a slave, he dies. But there's a caveat. But the slave survives a day or two, and this is where people really get kind of weird. Well, why is it okay if he dies instantly to kill the man, but if he survives a day or two, it's okay because the slave is property? And that would be a cultural understanding. Understand, here's the thing. To the rest of the world, you could hit a slave and kill it, and nothing would happen to you. Notice how it puts on par both rich and slave with the same level of justice. In other cultures, the rich would escape this because they could kill their slaves and nothing would happen to them because it's not murder when you kill a thing. But here, if he strikes one and kills it instantly, rich or poor are both held to the same standard. Now, however, they do assign property rights to the slave that they don't to free men. Well, I don't like that. Neither do I. Thank you, William Wilberforce, for allowing us to not have slavery anymore. If you don't understand that, go study some history. 22. This is really big. 22. First described case of what happens should you abort a baby. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman, so that the child comes out, but there's no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judge determines. Now we'll take a look at this. In our current debate about abortion, we have allowed successfully the male to be eliminated from the situation. And the reason why we have successfully allowed that to happen is we have bought into the argumentation that a woman's body includes the baby that is within the woman. And the problem with that is that's a flawed argument because the baby itself is not the woman. It is a separate entity unto its own and is only there for 9 months. And so we successfully allowed the discussion to be separated away from the husband because in that situation, many times if you were to ask the man, he'd go, no, I want my child. And we've allowed it to successfully shift away to where it's a woman's right to choose these things. Notice, folks, here in a moment, the child is going to receive a status that should terrify us. If a woman is hit and the child comes out and there's no harm to the child, you pay the fine that the husband says you pay. The judge says that's fair, pow, it's done. Now let's take a look at what happens if the child dies. But if there's harm, you shall pay life for life. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound. You can almost kind of sing that along. If the child... No, anyhow, that'd be kind of morbid, wouldn't it? Why, if it is simply nothing more than a clump of cells, if I hit it and it dies, do I die? I mean, we have been proving the case and seeing the case that the image bearer, those who strike the image of God itself, dies because it's not a bad thing to murder, though it is. It's a bad thing to put hold upon the image. The child itself is an image bearer. And so when I cause the child to die in its womb or on its way out of the womb, I have murdered an individual. Even in Exodus, God has assigned the preborn child the identity of image bearer. Think of all the people that have ripped children from the wombs of their mother. And the consequences of the number of times they've laid hands upon the image. And the destruction that is done to the image. See, one of the things about abortion is it's simply not the removal of a clump of cells. It is the willful attack upon the very image of God in the lowest form of humanity that you can, an infant child who cannot defend itself. Now, there's two debates on how to go about eradicating abortion from our land, and I am all for both cases. One is the absolute abolition of it all, and to where you try to pass laws that eliminate it completely. That's a good plan. The problem is, the reason why abortion is so common, it's so prevalent, is not because the laws make it easy. It's because the human heart allows it to be easy. The reason why it's easy for people to get an abortion and have an abortion, and this is not a sermon where I'm going to beat up on the folks that have had the abortion. You should pray for those because they will carry the scar of that decision with them for a long time. Stephanie and I both know a Christian lady that before she was a Christian had 2 abortions, and the scars of that are beyond just physical. And so the regret she lives with over it. But the reason why it is so prevalent in our culture has really nothing to do with laws. It's because we allow it. During this current election season, you even had very conservative Christians going, yeah, I know abortion is key, but I don't think you should vote for any one candidate. And I'm going, because we got to stop the Holocaust of the unborn. Okay, so how does not voting help that? Well, it doesn't. Then I don't understand what your issue is. We as a church, not this church, but Church Universal, could put an end to it. Why? Because we have a message that changed lives. And in that life-changing message, we then begin to understand what this text is talking about by us being image bearers. And if we simply just did that, you'd have all laws on the book for the murder of the unborn. Wouldn't need to change them. Because it's a heart issue that must change first. When our culture embraces a death cult of killing babies, it will it will eventually embrace other types of death cults. Why? Because when I can teach a child to devalue any life, I can teach a child to devalue every life. And that goes into the motion of, well, once you get to be a certain age, you're not really useful to society. Logan's Run. Anybody see that? Older folks, Logan's Run. More homework for you guys. Where's Delight? She's usually my non-movie watcher I pick on. She's out. Logan's Run. And a couple other dozens movies. What happens when you begin to be unuseful when you're older? Once I began to devalue one life, I can begin to devalue another life. And then I can then begin to eliminate another. I'll give you an example. My buddy Jason, his life expectancy is possibly this week. Instead of pumping him full of meds that are expensive and the treatment for his family, why don't we just end it for him now? I mean, he's not very useful. When I went to go see him, he was laying in a bed, zonked out in a morphine coma. Family is still upset, and they have to take care of him, and you have to pay a nurse to come in. Why don't we just, we're being cruel, prolonging that life. Why don't we just take that one out? I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? You all can get along behind me on that one, right? Yeah, right? Yeah, right? Why? No. Why? Because even in his weakened state and his weakened condition, he still bears the image of God. And to lay hold of the image itself is to lay hold of God himself and attempt to put that to death. And then I would bring condemnation upon myself because I have struck the very image bearer. Lest we think that abortion is simply more than just a clump of cells, God has already assigned its status of image bearer, which makes it human. Which makes it a person. And we allow this evil to continue on in our society because, well, it's just easier to allow something to happen. If every church got behind something like this, we could put an end to it. It requires simply more than just law change. It requires simply more than just changing rules, hoping that that will change the hearts and minds of people who like breaking those rules. It requires a change of the heart of the individual itself who believes that that thing that is within them is nothing more than a clump of cells. So when every piece of evidence you can point to and show it is a live being made up of one mom and one dad. See the status that is being elevated here? Infants, women, slaves. All elevated beyond just simply more than things to be bartered, killed at discretion, or just cast aside. Lastly, when a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free. Because of the eye. If he knocks out the tooth of the slave, the male or female, he shall go free because of the tooth. The master strikes the slave loses an eye, the master must now let the slave go. And then he uses a tooth. See, because I know where you're going. What if he beats the guy, but nothing really bad happens? So it goes from the eye, which is a big thing, because without one of your eyes, you do not lose depth perception. You now have a blind spot on whichever side it is, which I think many clean drivers have, because I haven't seen so many of them drive as badly. This is almost as bad as Atlanta, folks. We are almost as bad as Atlanta, okay? And then it references the tooth. Have you ever chipped a tooth? I've been fortunate enough in my life that I have only had a small chip in my tooth. I've never broke a tooth. I don't know how, because it's not from a lack of trying. But you can live a life fairly unhindered by the loss of a tooth. I mean, I watched the movie Castaway. Tom Hanks took it out with a pair of ice skates. I mean, when you can do that, I mean, come on, people, it's a tooth. There are people in England right now going, I have no idea what that I can't do an English accent this morning, sorry. Okay, there are people in Arkansas right now going, I don't know what you're talking about. I ain't got my teeth. I live just fine. But notice what it is. An eye is a pretty crucial part of the human body. It allows you to have depth perception. A tooth, you can get by without teeth, from what I hear. And the implication here is not simply if they knock out a tooth or knock out an eye that goes free. If you've damaged the slave, he goes free. And you see how radical this passage has become when we look at it actually within what's going on? Notice that simply the claim that Christianity and Judaism are very oppressive religions because they oppress people on. When you actually read the laws now, it might be because of the way sinful man practiced the religion. When we actually read what the text says, and if we were to sit and go through all these sundry laws, while there are a lot of laws where I cannot cross, should be stoned. I've mixed the threads of my fabric this morning. Well, you have those laws that are set up for ceremonial Israel. You have some of these that elevate the human condition beyond simply more than base nature. Slaves, women, children. And it elevates it up. And provides means to where both rich and poor are dispensed justice on an equal scale. See, the accusations of your culture don't work with these texts. You say, so what? So what? My culture's wrong. I know. But you will continue to have these accusations and conversations with your culture. I watch folks, when they get asked about sundry laws, go, that's not in the Bible. Only to be proven wrong by a pagan. Folks, that's the place you really don't want to be when you as a believer say, well, that's not in the Bible. And a non-believer can quote you your text better than you can. Many of these laws have a cultural significance behind it. Many of these laws have a uniqueness behind it in that they are ceremonial for the nation of Israel that sets Israel apart. They're also designed to give us guidance in how to understand the thou shalt not murder command that was given, that everyone tends to translate the way it's King James that says thou shalt not kill. It's a poor translation. Murder is the context. And then they begin to describe, because he knows, God knows how we human beings are, what constitutes murder. Killing a slave. Hitting a pregnant woman and causing her child to be born dead. That's murder. Yeah, but what if it's a medical procedure? Still a murder. We've had conversations about this over and over. And notice what it does. The value placed in the human being is not because the human being has value. You don't. You want what makes you valuable? You want what places value within you as an individual? Is that you bear the image. That's what assigns your value. There's nothing good about you. There's nothing good about me. In my wretched state, I was just as wicked as anybody else, trust me. Well, I think I was talking with somebody this morning about being named for the one thing you do, and I looked back and said, how many one things are you willing to be named for? Because I'm not. What gives you value in your base state outside of salvation and through Jesus Christ is the very fact that you bear the image of a holy God. And that in itself should be respected. It's not the wealth that you have. It's not the status that you have. It's not the position in life that you maintain. It's not whether or not you were good enough or a great enough guy. It's the fact that you bear the image of God. And now what gives us as believers even more value is nothing that we've done. It's the salvation which is done for us through Jesus Christ. And now the indwelling of the third person of the triune God has changed our lives and made a new heart within us. And then we have a new relationship with that Father and walk with Him. But notice, in both those cases, it's things done to us, not things done by us. Well, a lot of people come forward at revival this week. Many of them, their lives were changed, and they now understand the life that they have as a believer. Here in the next few weeks, we're going to see baptisms that come from those confessions. You're here today, and you've been struggling with the concept that the Christian life is just, it's the opiate for the masses. Even in some of the quirkiest rules that the text can lay out, you see the concept of God's love and God's care and God's concern for the people that He makes. Why? Because He makes you to conform to the image. As the praise band comes to sing, if you're here today and you would like to join in the fellowship of Skyline Baptist Church, I'd invite you to come forward. If you're here to, if you were from the revival and you have walked the aisle, but you're not a member, but would like to be baptized and received into the fellowship of Skyline Baptist Church, I invite you to come forward. If you will please stand as the praise band sings.